The day my sister stood up in court, smirked at the judge, and said, "Your Honor, my sister is legally stupid." I thought that was the lowest moment of my life. It wasn't. The lowest moment came 30 seconds later, when I realized she believed she had already won. And she had no idea what I was about to do next. Stick with me, because what happened in that courtroom didn't start there. It started the day our father died. My name is Marin Whitlock. I have always been the quiet twin. The soft one. The fragile one. At least that's what my older sister, Sloan Whitlock, liked to tell people. She said it with a smile, like she was protecting me. But really, she was shrinking me. When our father, Gregory Whitlock, died from a sudden stroke, everything changed. He owned a successful custom furniture manufacturing company in North Carolina, Whitlock & Sons Custom Woodcraft. It wasn't just a business. It was our family's legacy. Sloan had been helping him with finances for years. I trusted her. I never questioned her role. I believed we were a team. Until I saw the will. It had been changed 6 months before Dad died. My share was almost gone. Sloan was listed as majority owner. She said Dad wanted it that way. She said it calmly, confidently, like it was obvious. But something felt wrong. So I filed a challenge in court. That's when Sloan stopped pretending to be kind. In front of the judge, in front of lawyers, in front of strangers, she painted me as unstable. She brought up my old anxiety diagnosis from college. She said I couldn't handle pressure. She suggested I didn't understand complex financial structures. Then she leaned slightly toward the judge and said it. "Your Honor, my sister has always been legally, well, stupid." A few people laughed. I didn't look at them. I didn't cry. I just folded my hands in my lap and stayed quiet. Because Sloan thought silence meant weakness. What she didn't know was that I had already started digging. I had already found things that didn't make sense. Dates, transfers, signatures. And she definitely didn't know about the recording. She thought she was humiliating me. She didn't realize she was giving me exactly what I needed. Confidence. Because when someone believes they've already won, they stop being careful. And Sloan had just made her biggest mistake. Before the courtroom, before the lawyers, before the humiliation, there was our childhood. Sloan and I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina. We were twins, but we were nothing alike. Sloan was bold from the start. She talked first, laughed louder, ran faster. Teachers loved her confidence. Neighbors called her a natural leader. She liked competition. She liked winning. She liked being seen. I was different. I watched more than I spoke. I listened carefully. I noticed details other people missed. While Sloan chased attention, I studied people. I studied patterns. I liked understanding how things worked. Our father adored both of us. He truly did. But Sloan demanded his attention. She asked to go with him to the workshop. She asked questions about the machines, the clients, the numbers. She made sure she was always beside him. I never pushed my way in. So from the outside, it looked like Sloan was the obvious successor to Whitlock & Sons Custom Woodcraft. She was outgoing, confident, fearless. As we grew older, that difference became clearer. Sloan officially joined the company after college. She didn't have deep financial training, but she had personality. She handled meetings. She talked to suppliers. She charmed customers. I chose a different path. I studied accounting quietly. I earned certifications. I worked long hours learning tax codes, auditing rules, and financial reporting systems. I didn't announce it. I just did the work. At family dinners, Sloan would joke that I liked boring paperwork. She would laugh and say I would never survive real business pressure. I would smile and let her talk. But something important was happening behind the scenes. In public, our father praised Sloan. He called her driven. He told people she had vision. In private, things were different. Sometimes he would sit with me in his office after hours. He would close the door and lower his voice. He asked me small questions about numbers that didn't seem right. Certain expenses. Certain transfers. Certain inventory gaps. He didn't accuse anyone directly. But he trusted me with his concerns. And that trust mattered more than attention. Sloan always treated me like I was slow. Like I couldn't keep up. Like I didn't understand the big picture. I never corrected her. Because when someone believes you're harmless, they don't hide things from you. And I was paying attention to everything. 6 months before my father died, he said something that didn't make sense at the time. We were sitting in his office after closing. The machines were off. The workshop was quiet. He looked tired, more tired than usual. Then he said, almost casually, If anything ever looks off, check the March files. I asked him what he meant. He just shook his head and said, "Just remember that." I didn't understand then. But after he passed away from a sudden stroke, those words came back to me. When the new will was presented, I felt the first crack in my chest. It was dated in March. My share of the company had been reduced to almost nothing. Sloan was listed as majority owner of Whitlock and Sons Custom Woodcraft. Sloan said Dad had updated things to reflect reality. She spoke like it was simple, like I should have expected it, but I remembered March. So I asked for a copy of the will. The signature looked slightly shaky. Not completely different, but not steady either. My father always signed documents with strong, clean strokes. This one looked hesitant. The witnesses caught my attention next. One name stood out, Brent Halpern. Sloan's close friend. Not our father's longtime attorney. Not a neutral party. And the document wasn't notarized by the family lawyer who had handled everything for years. That wasn't normal. I didn't confront Sloan. I didn't accuse her. I started investigating quietly. Because that's what I was good at. I reviewed company financial records from January through March. At first, everything looked routine. Then I noticed a new entity listed in several transactions. A holding company I didn't recognize. When I traced it, my stomach tightened. It was registered under Sloan's name. Large amounts of money had been transferred there. Listed as consulting fees. The amounts weren't small. They were steady and frequent. Then I checked inventory reports. Some materials were marked as sold, but no matching client invoices existed. Items were missing from storage, yet there was no proper documentation. Individually, each issue could be explained away. Together, they formed a pattern. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. The will change wasn't just a simple update. It looked like preparation, like someone was moving pieces into place before making a final move. It felt like manipulation, but suspicion wasn't enough. If I was going to challenge this in court, I needed proof that our father hadn't signed that will freely. I needed evidence of coercion. And I had a feeling March held more than just paperwork. The March files told me something was wrong, but I still needed more. I started thinking about the weeks before my father died. He had not been in a nursing home long, but he did have temporary home health care after a minor fall. That was around the same time the will was changed. So I began looking for the nurse who had been assigned to him. Her name was Clara Donnelly. It took me a few calls and some searching, but I finally found her. She had left the agency and was working at a small clinic outside Asheville. I asked if we could meet. She sounded cautious but agreed. When we sat down, she looked uncomfortable. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I don't want to get involved in family disputes," she said gently. I understood. I told her I wasn't there to accuse anyone. I just needed clarity. At first, she gave careful answers. Yes, she had cared for my father for a few weeks. Yes, he had been recovering. Yes, Sloan handled most of the communication. Then I mentioned March. Specifically, the second week of March. Her expression changed. She looked down before speaking again. "That week was different," she admitted quietly. She explained that my father had been placed on stronger medication because he was in pain and having trouble sleeping. The dosage made him drowsy, sometimes confused. He repeated questions. He struggled to focus on long conversations. He wasn't himself, Clara said. My chest tightened. I asked if anything unusual happened that week. She hesitated again. Then she told me that Sloan had been very protective. She controlled who visited. She answered most questions for him. If someone called, Sloan picked up. And one afternoon, Clara said, Sloan told her she could leave early. She insisted she would handle things for the rest of the day. That afternoon fell in the same week the new will was signed. I didn't say anything for a moment. The timeline was lining up too clearly. A confused father. Heavy medication. Limited supervision. A private window of time. Clara didn't accuse Sloan of anything. She didn't need to. The facts were enough. When I walked out of that clinic, the air felt heavier. This wasn't just about favoritism or sibling rivalry. Something deliberate had happened in March. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just fighting for my share of an inheritance. I was uncovering something much bigger. After speaking with Clara, I went back to the workshop. It still smelled like sawdust and varnish. My father's tools were exactly where he left them. For a moment, I almost forgot why I was there. Then I remembered March. Dad had a habit. Whenever he had a new woodworking idea, he recorded it instead of writing it down. He kept a small digital recorder on his workbench. It was old, scratched, but reliable. I wasn't sure why I felt drawn to it, but I picked it up. The battery was low, but it still turned on. There were dozens of files. Most of them were short notes about table designs, chair joints, client requests. Then I saw a date. 2 days before the will was changed. My hands went cold. I pressed play. At first, there was silence. Then I heard my father's voice. It sounded different. Slower. Unsteady. He seemed confused, like he wasn't sure why he had started recording. He mumbled about paperwork. About being tired. Then I heard another voice in the background. Sloan. Faint but clear enough. She wasn't yelling. She sounded controlled. Calm. Just sign it, Dad. A pause. You don't want Marin ruining this company. Another pause. You said you trust me. My father hesitated. You could hear it in his breathing. Papers shuffled. A pen clicked. He said something I couldn't fully understand. It sounded uncertain. Sloan repeated herself. It's just formal. Nothing changes. The tone wasn't kind. It was firm. Pressuring. My heart pounded as I listened. I wanted him to say no. I wanted him to refuse. Instead, there was a long silence. Then the recording cut off mid-sentence. I stared at the device in my hand. It wasn't a clear confession. There was no direct statement like, I'm forcing you. There was no dramatic moment. But it didn't need to be dramatic. My father sounded disoriented. Sloan sounded determined. And the timing matched everything else. The medication. The early dismissal of the nurse. The shaky signature. The sudden will change. This wasn't coincidence. It was pressure. It was coercion. For the first time since Dad died, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I had leverage. And Sloan had no idea that the quiet sister she always underestimated was holding the one thing that could unravel everything. Once I had the recording, I knew I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I filed a legal petition to contest the will. It wasn't an emotional decision. It was calculated. I submitted the paperwork through the proper court in North Carolina and requested a formal review of the March will. Sloan's response was immediate and aggressive. Within days, she hired a high-profile estate attorney named Victor Calhoun. He was known for winning complicated inheritance cases. Expensive suits. Sharp voice. The kind of lawyer who made people nervous just by looking at them. Sloan wasn't playing defense. She went on attack. In her official response, she claimed I was emotionally unstable. She said I had always struggled under pressure. She painted me as someone who could not handle complex business decisions. Then she crossed a line. She submitted my old therapy records from college. Years ago, I had seen a counselor for anxiety during finals season. It was private, personal, and now it was attached to a court filing like evidence of weakness. Her attorney requested a psychological evaluation, suggesting I might not be mentally competent to manage a company. It was ruthless. Family members started choosing sides quickly. Aunts, cousins, even distant relatives. Most of them relied on Whitlock and Sons in some way. Jobs, contracts, favors, and Sloan controlled the company. So they supported her. I heard whispers at family gatherings. That I was jealous. That I was grieving poorly. That I was trying to destroy what Dad built. Not one of them asked me for my side. Suddenly, I was alone. But I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself publicly. I didn't cry in front of them. I stayed calm. Because this reaction told me something important. Sloan believed she was safe. She believed attacking my character would scare me into backing down. She thought if she embarrassed me enough, questioned my mental health enough, I would withdraw. She underestimated something. I wasn't filing the lawsuit out of anger. I was filing it because I had evidence. She didn't know about the recording. She didn't know how much financial data I had already analyzed. She didn't know I had consulted with a forensic accountant quietly before ever stepping into court. While she focused on tearing down my reputation, I focused on building a case. She thought this was a fight about emotions. It wasn't. It was about facts. And facts don't panic. They wait. The first major hearing felt more like a performance than a legal process. Sloan arrived confident. Perfect suit. Calm smile. She greeted people like she was attending a business meeting, not fighting her own sister in court. When it was her turn to speak, she didn't hesitate. She went on offense immediately. She described me as fragile. She reminded the court about my old anxiety diagnosis. She suggested I struggled with pressure and decision-making. Every sentence was carefully crafted to make me look small. Then she shifted to my career. She called my accounting work entry-level paperwork. She implied that balancing numbers in a back office was nothing compared to running a manufacturing company. She spoke smoothly, convincingly, as if she had practiced it in front of a mirror. I sat still and let her talk. Then she leaned slightly toward the judge and said it. "Your Honor, my sister is legally stupid." There was a sharp pause in the room. A few people gasped. Then I heard soft laughter from somewhere behind us. Even the judge raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the bluntness of the statement. Sloan didn't apologize. She didn't soften it. She acted as if she had simply stated a fact. Her strategy was clear. Public embarrassment. If she could make me look weak enough, unstable enough, incompetent enough, maybe the court would question my credibility before even looking at evidence. She thought I would shrink. She thought I would fold under the pressure. But humiliation only works when someone has nothing solid to stand on. I did. When Sloan finished, my attorney stood up. Rowan Pierce was nothing like Victor Calhoun. He didn't have flashy suits or dramatic gestures. He spoke quietly, carefully. He rarely showed emotion. But he was precise. "Your Honor," Rowan said calmly, "we would like to request permission to introduce new evidence." The courtroom shifted slightly. Papers rustled. Victor Calhoun frowned. Sloan smirked. She leaned back in her chair, confident. She believed we were scrambling. She believed we were reacting out of desperation after her attack. She didn't know that this moment had been planned. She didn't know that while she was focused on humiliating me, we were focused on timing. Rowan had waited until she made her character attack. Now the court was listening closely. Sloan thought she had just won the room. She didn't realize she had just made everyone pay attention. Rowan stood calmly and pressed play on the small speaker. The courtroom went silent. At first, there was only a low hum. Then my father's voice came through, shaky and confused. He was trying to read a document, but it was hard to follow his words. In the background, Sloan's voice was faint but firm, repeating things like, "Just sign it, Dad," and "You said you trust me." The urgency in her tone was clear. My father hesitated, stumbled over words, then the recording ended abruptly. The silence lingered. You could feel the tension. Everyone knew this was different. Next, Rowan presented forensic handwriting analysis. He explained clearly, without exaggeration, that my father's signature on the march will showed tremors and inconsistencies that didn't match his usual handwriting. The notary seal had been improperly logged, and the witnesses didn't match standard protocol. Sloan shifted in her seat. She tried to maintain composure, but her fingers tapped nervously on the armrest. Then Rowan turned to the financial evidence. He revealed that $840,000 had been transferred from the company into a shell company registered under Sloan's name. The transfers didn't happen after the will changed. They began weeks before. They were planned, methodical, deliberate. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he took in the evidence. The courtroom buzzed quietly, people whispering, trying to process what they had just seen. Sloan's confidence started to crack. Her smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic. She looked around the room, as if searching for allies who had no answers. Then her gaze landed on me. For the first time, Sloan didn't see her quiet, soft twin. She didn't see someone fragile. She saw a woman who had quietly built a case, piece by piece, anticipating every move she might make. Someone she had underestimated entirely. I sat still, hands folded. My heart raced, but my face was calm. The courtroom shifted. People were no longer laughing at me. They were watching Sloan struggle under the weight of her own actions. That day, everything changed. What had started as humiliation became revelation. The evidence was undeniable. The manipulation, the coercion, the financial transfers, they were all there. And Sloan finally realized that the game she thought she had won had just turned completely against her. For the first time, she saw me not as the legally stupid sister, but as someone she could never have predicted. The judge cleared his throat and spoke slowly, as if weighing every word. He announced that the march will was invalid. Every alteration my father hadn't made freely was null and void. The previous estate distribution, the one my father had intended, was reinstated. My heart thumped, but I stayed still, listening carefully. Then he ordered an immediate investigation into financial misconduct. All company transfers, suspicious accounts, and irregular filings would be examined. Sloan's face went pale. For the first time in the courtroom, she didn't know what to say. Shortly after, criminal charges were filed. undue influence, fraud, embezzlement. The words echoed in the room, heavy and final. The board of Whitlock and Sons didn't waste time either. They removed Sloan from her position pending the investigation. Her control over the company, the empire she thought she had secured, was gone, at least for now. Family members who had mocked me, who had whispered that I was weak or incompetent, sat silently. Their whispers died. Their judgment stopped. Some avoided my eyes entirely. The confidence they had in Sloan had vanished, replaced with uncertainty and doubt. I didn't smile. I didn't clap. I didn't gloat. This wasn't about public humiliation. It wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. It was about control. For years, I had been underestimated, labeled fragile, called legally stupid. My sister had built her confidence by thinking I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't act. But I had acted. Carefully. Patiently. I had waited, observed, collected facts, and prepared. And now the power shifted back. I felt a strange calm. I had proven that the truth mattered more than appearances. That facts could overcome manipulation. That quiet perseverance could outmatch arrogance and charm. I looked at Sloan. She avoided my eyes, but I didn't look away. I didn't need to. The evidence had done its work. The law had done its work. And I had taken back control. The courtroom settled into murmurs. Lawyers discussed next steps. The investigation would take months, maybe years. But for me, that day, the balance had shifted. I understood something crucial. Power isn't about shouting the loudest or humiliating the weakest. It's about preparation, patience, and precision. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was in the position my father had always hoped I would reach, fully aware, fully capable, fully in control. Months passed. Sloan faced criminal court. She looked smaller than ever in the courtroom, stripped of confidence, her plans unraveling in front of everyone. The charges, fraud, embezzlement, undue influence, were serious. The walls that had protected her crumbled. Meanwhile, I had quietly taken control. I now held majority ownership of Whitlock and Sons. The company that had been the center of our family feud was finally in order. I restructured it carefully. Transparent accounting systems replaced the old chaotic ledgers. Independent oversight was brought in to make sure no one could manipulate finances again. And Brent Halpern, Sloan's accomplice, was gone. Fired immediately. Everything was methodical. Nothing impulsive. I wasn't looking for revenge in the dramatic sense. I wanted stability. Justice. Balance. One afternoon, just before her sentencing, I went to the holding room where Sloan was waiting. She didn't look at me at first. Then, with a low, bitter whisper, she said, "You planned this." I shook my head slowly, keeping my voice steady. "No," I said. "I just stopped protecting you." Her face twisted with disbelief. She had always believed I was the soft, fragile one. The legally stupid twin who could never understand the world of business or law. She thought I would be easily manipulated or intimidated. But in the end, she had underestimated me completely. I had never shouted. I had never yelled. I had never acted out of anger. I had relied on facts, patience, and careful preparation. I understood the law, the numbers, and the people involved better than she ever imagined. Every move I made was precise. Every step calculated. And now, Sloan was paying the price for her arrogance. Not publicly, not with humiliation, but with the full weight of accountability. I left the room calmly, my head held high. The courtroom drama, the family betrayals, the months of tension, they had all led to this moment. I hadn't sought vengeance. I had reclaimed what was mine. Sloan had always mocked me, called me weak, called me stupid, but I had the last word. Without raising my voice once, without a single dramatic gesture, I had won. The company was stable. The law was on my side. And for the first time in years, I felt fully in control, strong, respected, and ready to lead Whitlock and Sons into the future, on my own terms. Sloan had underestimated me from the start. And now, she finally understood the quiet power of someone who had been legally stupid all along. If you faced betrayal or felt underestimated, remember, patience, preparation, and knowledge are your strongest tools. Study the law, understand finances, and document everything carefully. These skills can protect your rights and help you reclaim control. Don't act in anger. Act with strategy and informed confidence.